The New Orleans Saints have a need for Shaheed. Yeah, the joke is overplayed, but the player is criminally underused. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to take a look at how the Saints can utilize motion on the offensive side, a little bit of eye candy to improve their run game throughout the last 5 games of the season. What's led to more sacks? We'll break that down as a part of our Film Watch Wednesday. And first, we're going to get started with Rashid Shaheed, the Weber State alum that has come in and absolutely blown the top off of expectations as an undrafted free agent rookie coming into this year. You remember, of course, that we've had this type of undrafted free agent excitement around the New Orleans Saints before with a guy like Deontay Hardy and his injury, which has kept him, it was a turf toe injury that required surgery that's kept him on the sideline for the majority of the season, is exactly what has led to the opportunities for Rashid Shaheed. But I'll tell you what, the young wide receiver deserves more of those opportunities. I can't tell you how fast Rashid Shaheed is because, fun fact, he's actually never run a 40-yard dash in his life. But I can tell you, that boy fast. He fast. And the New Orleans Saints should be looking at more ways to get him involved. Here's an example for you of how he's been utilized so far. He's run 79 routes or been in for 79 passing reps so far this season. 44 of those routes have pushed him vertically, while only 35 have kind of existed in the inside-outside breaking categories of hitches, comebacks, digs, screens, things like that. Or, well, I guess a screen would technically be outbreaking, but you know what I mean. This shows that Shaheed has what it takes and has really been able to show you that he can grow in terms of being a 3-level threat because he is being utilized and running routes at all 3 of those levels. Though half or more than half of his routes have pushed him vertically, you're seeing more of those short and intermediate routes being run. You saw a really great whip route against the San Francisco 49ers. That was a very impressive route. It was a route that was so pretty, I'd holla at it. Like, that's how pretty it was. So it was a really nice route. You just want to see more of that, not necessarily from Rashid Shaheed, but you want to see the Saints putting him in those positions a little bit more. So one of the things that you can also add in is, of course, all the things that he can do as a gadget player in terms of like jet sweeps and reverses. You add in the return game, of course, and there's, sort of this look at Rashid Shaheed that says, hey, as long as this guy stays healthy, he should have a long-standing role for the New Orleans Saints, at least in the foreseeable future as he continues to grow. The issue, though, is that of those 79 passing routes or passing snaps that he was on the field for, he's only been targeted 11 times. Now, you want to talk about percentages and efficiency? 72.7% catch rate, because on those 11 targets, he's caught 8 of those passes for 164 yards and a touchdown. That means that out of those 8 receptions, 7 of them have resulted in either a first down or a score, including he also had a rushing touchdown, which was his first ever career touch, and of course, a rush last week against the San Francisco 49ers for a first down. So he's shown you that he can produce efficiently with the ball in his hands. You just want to see the ball in his hands more. For the record, 4 of those 11 targets have come 20 plus yards down the field. He's caught 3 of those. That's an outstanding percentage. He's got a very high grade when it comes to being targeted downfield. However, you have 4 targets 20 yards away from the line of scrimmage. You have 3 targets behind the line of scrimmage. Then you only have 2 targets in the short area, which would be 1 to 9 yards from the line of scrimmage, and then 2 targets in the intermediate area, which would be 10 to 19 yards from the line of scrimmage. So that means that 36% of his targets are coming 20 yards downfield, 27% of his targets are coming behind the line of scrimmage. The offset there tells you that what he needs are more opportunities in the intermediate and short area game. Why? This gives him an opportunity to get in space over the middle of the field and turn into a returner or a runner with the ball in his hands. Get him an opportunity to do what it is that he does best. This is something that the Saints had kind of started to figure out how to do with Deontay Hardy last year or the year before last, and then really kind of unlocked Deontay Hardy as a deep threat last year and kind of skirted away from the returner aspect or getting him open in space. The Saints would do well to get Rashid Shaheed involved in that area of the game and allow him to grow there. All 4 of the short and intermediate targets that he has had so far this season have come since the Raiders game, including receiving no targets up against the Ravens. So lately you have seen more of those than you saw in his first pair of games against the Arizona Cardinals and against the Cincinnati Bengals. He does see a ton of off coverage. So he gets off coverage about 63%. Why is this important? In off coverage, the cornerback that's lined up opposite him or in front of him, as he usually draws cornerback coverage more than safety coverage or linebacker coverage, things like that, lines up on the outside a lot. He ends up seeing a lot of space in between him and that corner. One of the reasons why you see that off coverage is because of the threat of his speed, because he can beat you down the field and he can close those gaps quickly. We saw what happened to Jalen Ramsey, right? That gap closed way faster than Jalen Ramsey expected to. Kind of one of the nice perks of not having a 40-yard dash time. But if you're going to get that off coverage, more of those whip routes like we saw against the San Francisco 49ers, more slants, more drags to where he can catch the ball in motion, get the ball placed right in front of him so he can catch it in stride and continue on after that and turn into that returner that he is with that incredible field vision, then he's going to have a real chance to become a game breaker. The thing is, the New Orleans Saints have to trust that he can do that and have to put him in positions for him to continue to develop there, because we know that he has the talent. We know that he's developing that route tree and he's being able to now attack not just deep, but and not just in vertical situations. He's able to attack deep over the middle of the field, like we saw the big 30-plus yard catch against the San Francisco 49ers, for instance, the screen to him in against the Niners, the jet sweep to him against the Niners, the whip route against the Niners. So in even the most recent game, we're seeing more and more of the 3-level threat that he can become. You just want to see the Saints get him a little bit more involved, continue to trust that he's going to grow there. You have him and Chris Olave, and the two of them being able to continue to grow as 3-level threats is huge, especially while you still have a guy like Jarvis Landry in the building who is a free agent after the season to help them continue to develop in exactly those categories. That's a huge step forward for you as you move into 2023. Even if you can't go on a 5-game run here, which again seems unlikely, and make the playoffs and all these other things here in 2022, you continue to compete here in 2022 and develop these players so that they're that much further ahead in terms of their scale, in terms of their development, whatever it might be, once you get to 2023. Because Rashid Shaheed could have a long-standing impact in a New Orleans Saints uniform as long as he gets the opportunities that he deserves. And he certainly deserves more of them. Like we said, the phrase is overstated, it's overrated, it's overused, but Rashid Shaheed himself, underutilized. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at the New Orleans Saints sacks. 33 sacks in the season. All of a sudden, they're in the top 10. What has changed, particularly over the course of the last 7 games? The answer isn't necessarily what you think. We'll get to that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. First, I want to tell you about our friends over at Turo. Today's episode is brought to you by Turo, Turo, the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car that you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. So it's actual folks that own the cars that will bring them to you, even when you go ahead and check them out. And they have a huge selection that's available for you for just about any occasion or budget across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. So you can book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family vacation. Maybe you're looking for a luxury car for a special event like a birthday or a holiday, something like that. Or maybe you just want to get an opportunity to test drive a Tesla or an electric car to see how it fits your lifestyle. One of our guys over at Locked On Mavs, Isaac, did exactly that not too long ago by using Turo. And like I mentioned, many of those Turo hosts will actually bring the car directly to you as well. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive today at Turo.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Audible. Audible is releasing a new slate of football podcasts that you're sure to love, including right now, Block Forever, which you can find wherever you get your podcast. Block Forever is a brand new podcast that features former NFL All-Pro Ryan Khalil and Audible. He sits down with star players, including coaches, former players, former pros from across the league, and gets into some real conversations about what happens on the field, as well as behind the scenes inside the locker room, during team meetings, and even back at the hotel. Some pretty fun stories there. Talking to guys like Christian McCaffrey about his love-hate relationship with fantasy football, Juju Smith-Schuster about his honest opinions on players and positions across the league. They're also having conversations around things like player psyche, player psychology, playing through pain, being a leader, and of course, how to deal with combative teammates as well, because nothing is out of bounds over on this show. So catch the full Block Forever series, available anywhere you get your podcast, available everywhere. Now, Audible, get in the game. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. The New Orleans Saints have 33 sacks on the season. All of a sudden, they're in the top 10 there. What has been going right here as of late? We're setting out to answer that question as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget for your second listen to go and check out Locked On Sports today as well, getting all the news you need around the wild, wacky world of sports in around 20 to 25 minutes with host Peter Bukowski and, of course, insight from the local experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Find that on this app, Odyssey, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. So, Saints, 9th in the NFL in sacks. Remember, there was a time where we were talking about this team not even getting to 40 sacks on the season, potentially. Now they're sitting at 33 with 5 games to go. Things are looking good. And 23 of those sacks have come in the last 7 games. That means 10 in the first 5. Just 10 in the first 5. So the majority of the New Orleans Saints sacks, 39% of those sacks, have come on third downs, 33 on first downs, 39% have also come in the fourth quarter. These notions are important because what it tells you, the Saints are getting sacks at the NFL's 9th highest rate on defense at pivotal times. They're forcing teams to get back in their count a little bit, back behind the sticks on first down, or they're getting them in the long and late downs in the third, on third downs, forcing them to punt, ending drives, but then also getting those done in the fourth quarter as well, to where you could potentially be ending games. So what has happened over the course of the past 7 games that has gone their way? Well, it's not actually anything on that. Well, okay, there are some things on the defensive line that we'll discuss, but a lot of this can also be chalked up to what's happening furthest away from the defensive line in coverage, second level coverage, as well as in the secondary as well. The Saints have started to roll a lot more 2 deep safety looks starting in week 6, which is understandable because that is when Marcus Maye was kind of back on the mend. You saw all of those deep shots that happened against the New Orleans Saints, against the Seattle Seahawks. And since then, the Saints have been able to keep a little bit of a lid on 20-plus yard air yard completions with Marcus Maye back in the lineup, though he has missed a game since then as well. But before that, the Saints were running 50% of their coverages when they got sacks in 1 deep safety, meaning that there was like cover 1 or cover 3. So that puts you in a situation where you were leaving these guys on the outside in man coverage on cover 1, or you were giving up depth because your corners are bailing on the outside when it comes to cover 3, because they've got to get those deep areas of those deep zones on the deep thirds. So you're seeing that the Saints now are running a lot more of those cover 2 looks. They're able to trust their corners to play a little bit more press man on the outside. Saints using a lot of press man with 2 of their corners. Paulson Adebo getting healthier has had an impact. Alontae Taylor's spark has had an impact as well. Now, there are some things that have been working lately on the New Orleans Saints defensive line as well that I don't want to discredit. 2 stunts led to sacks over the course of the first 5 games. It's just 20% of the sacks at that time coming on stunts. But 8 of them have resulted in sacks over the course of the last 7 games. So you've seen frequency step up in terms of stunts, and you've also seen the efficiency of stunts starting to work. The effectiveness is also up. So that's a big piece of what the New Orleans Saints have been able to do. But again, some of that is a defensive line. Some of that is actually coming from the second level, because Demario Davis is oftentimes a part of those stunts. Demario Davis right now has helped a ton despite actually rushing the passer less. The Saints have been very wise in terms of their deployment of Demario Davis and allowing him to rush the passer in moments when he's going to be most effective. A lot of third down rushes, things like that. So he's only got 58 pass rushing snaps so far this season, and he's already got a career high in 8 sacks, which far surpasses his previous career high. So at least 126 pass rushing snaps he's had since being in New Orleans so far. Now all of a sudden he's got half of that basically, or less than half of that, and has topped his previous career high in terms of sacks. So Demario Davis is a key factor. His ability to add as a stuntman and add some of those kind of stunts, twists, things like that can confuse an offensive line eye candy, which we're going to discuss how that goes the other way and could actually impact the Saints run game here in a little bit. But they've been adding a little bit more of that, which has helped down on the defensive line and in the trenches. But some of that is coming from the second level, and then the secondary's ability for coverage has made a big impact as well. So the Saints don't have to do much here moving forward. They can continue at the rate that they're at and cross 40 sacks for the, what would that be, seventh straight season now since 2017, since Ryan Nielsen has been in the room. Is that right? 7 sacks? No, sorry. It would be the fifth year in a row that they've been able to get that done. So you keep winning with coverage on the early downs, which is then ends up backing up that team so that they're running sort of these third and longs that allows the defensive line to pin their ears back. It allows you to get a little bit more aggressive as a defensive play caller and as a defensive coordinator running these stunts, utilizing Demario Davis in the pass rush game. Doesn't hurt that you have a guy like Caden Ellis and even Zach Bond who have shown some flashes there as well. I think for Caden Ellis, I'd say more than flashes at this point. He's got 3.5 sacks over the past 3 games. The guy is balling out. But additionally, this team is also adding coverage sacks on top of it. So the defense, which gave the New Orleans Saints an opportunity to win against the San Francisco 49ers, is doing all the things that they need to do to remain efficient, effective, and productive when it comes to the pass rush. That's why the sacks have had a swell over the course of the past 7 games. And the Saints can the Saints, without having to do much adjustment, even in a game where they were without their 2 starting defensive ends, for instance, where they had Carl Granderson and Peyton Turner starting on the outside, they shifted, allowed them to be a little bit more speedy off the edge, be a little bit more aggressive off the edge, all that. And we saw the way that worked out for them in a win against the Los Angeles Rams. So even when things haven't gone their way, they've been able to adjust well enough to make things happen and remain consistent where they've been productive. And the Saints don't have to go very far here, as long as they're getting the coverage deep, as long as they're getting that second level pressure in those selective moments and they're efficient and effective when they want it. And of course, as long as they're producing on the ends, as they've been able to do, if you add a little bit more of an interior push, this New Orleans Saints defense is not going anywhere over the course of these past 5 games when it comes to the sack category. Coming up next, how can the New Orleans Saints utilize eye candy on the offensive side to improve their run game, even if they are introducing it in passing plays? We'll break it down, something that the New Orleans Saints could add as they continue on over the course of the next 5 games to get that run game back going, because it has not looked great over the course of the past few weeks. Got that coming up for you as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs is the #1 source and the best place, especially if you're a small business that you're looking towards, if you want to post a job and you want to hire to help to expand your company. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the most quality candidates that are available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because they're helping you find the right people faster and, more importantly, for free. They're also going to hook you up with things like screening questions to make sure that you can easily focus in on the candidates that have the right skills, that have the requisite knowledge and experience, so that you can quickly prioritize those who you'd like to interview and eventually hire. It's one of the reasons why those small businesses that I mentioned have ranked LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competition that might be out there. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the quality candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with how the New Orleans Saints can improve their run game by simply diversifying and expanding the way that they utilize motion. Okay, so we're gonna speak about this from sort of how this improves their run game, but in order for motion to really work, you have to utilize it in the passing game as well. So we're going to look at what the New Orleans Saints have done in those 2 categories, run versus pass split, when it comes to or is relative to motion, and compare that to one of the NFL's most effective run games and how they utilize motion as well. So with motion, the New Orleans Saints are running, regardless, standard run pass split for the New Orleans Saints 39% run, 61% in the passing game. So basically a 60-40 split. That's a nice, healthy place to be. That's kind of where the New Orleans Saints have been in their most successful years, 60% pass, 40% run, or somewhere thereabouts in that general range, give or take 5%. With motion, though, the Saints are 69% rush, 31% pass. That is a big time tip off to your run game. Now, some of that has to do with utilizing Taysom Hill as a runner. Sometimes what the Saints will do, and oftentimes what the Saints will do, particularly in those QB power situations, is motion a fullback or a tight end from one side of the line of scrimmage or from one side of the formation across the back of the formation to the other side, and then either treat that player as a lead blocker along with a pulling guard and have Taysom Hill run behind him, or use that as the eye candy that sends the defense one way and then goes the other. But if you start to utilize that kind of eye candy a little bit and challenge the discipline of the defenses across a more diverse play calling set, then all of a sudden those things become more effective. So if you're using those with Alvin Kamara in the backfield on handoffs, if you're using that and still throwing the ball, there's one motion that the Saints have been using, which is kind of this hook motion where they've had Chris Olave on the outside. He runs underneath with Taysom Hill in shotgun. He runs underneath Taysom Hill, turns back around, loops around him, and goes back towards the outside. The Saints have run that motion several times and have run with it every time so far, but eventually that's going to be a pass to Chris Olave to get him some out in space and get him a bit of a head start to catch it in stride. You can also eventually see Rashid Shaheed getting involved in that motion as well. But the Saints have sort of utilized motion quite a bit. And so like we mentioned, or have utilized motion enough, but the issue is that they've overloaded when they use motion and how it's relative to their run game. Again, 69% of the time when they use motion, they run the football. On the other hand, which isn't helping them either, when they don't use motion, they're throwing the ball 75% of the time. So you're tipping off quite a bit so far here in terms of around 3/4 of the time. Motion tells you one thing, no motion tells you another thing. So for the Saints, there are two pieces of motion that they utilize the most. The first example is a cross motion or motion across. That's what we were just discussing, to where you start off on one side of the formation and then motion to the other side of the formation or the other side of the field before the ball is snapped or even as the ball is snapped. They've utilized this mostly to a 63% run, 37% pass split. So again, very heavily weighted to the run. Utilized mostly on first and second downs with 7 to 10 yards to go, i.e. rundowns, as well as within the 20-yard lines, i.e. a little bit more diversity in terms of what you can employ or deploy in between the 20s. Second most popular motion so far has been what you call close motion. That's moving from somebody that's out wide to in tight to the formation or even stacked behind the next interior wide receiver. So it's just, you usually keep them on the same side of the field. You're just motioning them in a little bit tighter to the formation. The good news here is that when the Saints utilize that, which has been around 38 times so far this season, right? 19 plus 19. Yep. They've run 19 times. They've passed 19 times. So it's 50-50. That's very balanced. You don't need that much balance. It could be 45-55. It could even be 40-60. But when you start getting into 65-35, those types of categories, then you're effectively tipping one way or another at that point. So when you look at where the Saints are here at 50-50, you're not going to strike dead even. You're not going to be that, beautifully symmetrical with all of them. But they love running this motion from either the left or right hash. So next time you're watching a Saints game and they're on the left or right hash, watch for that. As opposed to in the middle of the field, watch for that little close motion to come in. And they oftentimes do it with only one running back on the field. They oftentimes do it on first and second down from 7 to 10 yards to go and in between the 20. So the same place that they utilize that cross motion. I'll tell you why that's important here in just a little bit. Over 50% of these snaps have resulted in either no gain or just 3 yards. There's a reason why. They've averaged 3 yards per carry and only a 47% completion rate when they utilize this motion. One of the reasons why that is because there's no counterpunch right now to when that motion is utilized in short yardage situations to create some of the eye candy that could be utilized to challenge the defensive discipline over on the other side. So even though you're running and passing at an even split when you utilize this motion, you're doing them in the same situations over and over and over again, tipping to the defense at least what to watch for and where these different things can go. So, and they oftentimes, by the way, when they run the ball, they oftentimes run to the motion side. So that ends up being your giveaway. So what would help the New Orleans Saints here, how do you make this better, is if you continue to be diversified, you continue to kind of strike a little bit of a balance, but you need a counterpunch and you need to start utilizing these motions in short yardage situations as well, not just in the 7 to 10 yard range on first and second downs. Here's an example for you. Philadelphia Eagles, one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL over the course of the past majority of seasons. They use motion on about 31% of their snaps. When they use motion, they're passing the ball 55% of the time, running it 45% of the time, much more evenly balanced. When they don't use motion, 48% of the time, they're running the ball, 52% of the time, they're passing the ball. Very, very balanced. That keeps you unpredictable when you can be that balanced. They use across the field motion as well as closed motion, just like the New Orleans Saints. Those are their two most popular. And when they utilize those two in across motion, 48-52 is the split. In closed motion, 41-59 is a split. Very, very balanced in those two, but still a little bit enough of a diversity to keep things interesting and challenge the eye discipline of the opposing defenders who are watching that motion. So if you're watching the motion and you're a defense, you see the motion go to the other side and the Saints, let's say, make a habit out of throwing to that motion man, then you start to treat that motion as an indicator of a pass. But then if you're drawing the eyes of a linebacker by motioning a tight end that way, you could also be taking that linebacker out of the box because his concentration is going towards where that tight end is, lightens up the box a little bit, and then you can attack in the run game in those situations. That's just an example of how eye candy and eye discipline can be challenged based on motion. The key differences between the Philadelphia Eagles and the New Orleans Saints: the Philadelphia Eagles, 33% of the time that they use closed motion, they're using it in short yardage situations, 1 to 3 yards in the down. So whether it be first, second, third down, whatever it might be. And they're also using 47% of those closed motions on third down, not on first and second down like the New Orleans Saints are doing. And even in those situations, including scrambles, the Philadelphia Eagles are calling a 53 to 47% run to split rate when they use those closed motions in short yardage situations. There's enough multiplicity, there's enough balance that ends up keeping defenses honest because it's very multiple, it's very balanced, and therefore it is very, very unpredictable for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that is something that the New Orleans Saints could stand to add to their offense as an exotic mix-in as they move forward. Now, having a mobile quarterback certainly helps these things, but if you're going to continue to utilize Taysom Hill more and more at the quarterback position, not a bad idea to couple that with all of this motion, not just when Taysom Hill is under center, but utilizing it, creating the eye candy, challenging the eye discipline on other plays so that you can maximize when you want to utilize that motion as a lead blocker or to distract from where convince the defense you're going one way while you're actually going another, utilizing it in misdirection. So that's the way that the New Orleans Saints could use motion. That might have been long and boring. I hope it wasn't. I hope that was interesting for you. I thought it was very interesting, but we'll see. But you know how it goes. I'm a nerd. So let me know. Let me know. But I appreciate y'all very much for coming through for another episode of Locked On Saints, for making us your first listen of the day every day. Coming up tomorrow, it's Crossover Thursday. David Harrison and I breaking down the New Orleans Saints, a Monday night matchup with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Saints only 3.5 point favorites at the time that we recorded the crossover. So Vegas isn't sleeping on the Saints in this one, and maybe I shouldn't either. So we'll discuss all of that as we continue on this week with Locked On Saints. Tomorrow's episode will be the Crossover Thursday. Friday's episode will get you ready for what the New Orleans Saints need to do to win in Tampa. And then Monday, I'll be in Tampa, and then we'll do another breakdown ahead of that Monday Night Football matchup. Maybe a little bit more keys to victory, answer some questions, things like that. Appreciate you as always, like I said, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports today so you can join all of the awesome local experts here at the Locked On Podcast Network who are bringing you beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes the way that only Locked On can. Find them on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Appreciate you as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.